Then I brought in the borrowed minor 4, and then I still resolved where the 4 wanted to go to 1. Yes, Emily?
Do they go both ways, like the major G borrows the minor G, and the minor G borrows the major G? Like, could you draw an arrow going both ways? Or are we just talking about what the minor key borrows?
All of this is talking about what the major key borrows. The minor key typically only borrows the bigger key third.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. So there's a lot more borrowing going on in major keys than in minor keys. Okay? Now, the 5 chord, if you're using a harmonic minor scale, is actually already the same chord. We don't need to be borrowing around here. Okay. But look at the 6 chord. B flat is a major chord. B minor is a minor chord. And one's built on B flat, one's built on B minor. This is also a common borrowed chord, which is called B flat 6. For the same reason this is called the flat 3. Now what I want to do right now, we're going to look at some examples. I really want to look at examples. I've got some examples from Brahms, the great classical composer, and I got some examples from the Beatles, of course. So we're going to look at these examples and look at how they use these borrowed chords. There is another one, which we didn't see up here, because Matt wrote, as he was supposed to, he wrote the chords based on a harmonic minor scale. But if you use a natural minor scale, you wouldn't have a C sharp here, you'd have a C natural, which would be C, E, G. And this chord is often borrowed into major keys as well. It's called the flat 7. Now, the flat 7 shows up a ton in rock, classic rock, because you have a tonic, like D major, and then they keep bringing in the C chord, and they kind of hover back and forth. You hear it? This chord right here? It's very much a classic rock sound. It's a borrowed flat 7. You know, I don't hear it a lot in classical music, but I hear it a lot in modern pop. So, let's take a look at some examples now of people who are using borrowed chords. First, we're going to look at a Beatles song. Hand out this chord chart to you. It's in the key of D. I did that on purpose because we just talked about the key of D up here. And here's one for Crystal and one for Alexa. Okay. Now, where do you see the first chord that does not belong in the key of D? The G minor. There's no G minor in the key of D. Nowhere. It's actually over the word nowhere. I understand. That makes sense. Yeah. But now let's back up before the G minor. Give me the Roman numerals before the G minor. At the beginning, we have a 1. What's the next chord? Excellent. No, there's no 6. 4. 1. A 2. And then a G minor. What do we call a G minor when we're in the key of D major? The minor 4. So circle it and put a little Roman numeral 4 there. We're borrowing it from D major, borrowing it from the parallel key. Now, why can it not be a secondary dominant? Because some of you are thinking, well, why can't we make it a secondary dominant? Why can it not be a secondary dominant? Because it's minor. Excellent, guys. A dominant chord has to be major or dominant 7th of its quality. Why can it not be a secondary leading tone chord?
It's not diminished.
It's not diminished. You see, you can rule out the possibilities by the quality of the chord. Yes?
If it were diminished, could you do that? Would it be a secondary?
You mean if it was a G diminished?
Yes.
Okay, this is a great question. If it was a G diminished, then you would have to take a second to figure out whether it was a secondary leading tone chord or not. What does G lead to? No, G does not lead to A. It's
A sharp.
A flat. Is there an A flat in the key of D?
No.
No. So one of the things about secondary leading tone chords or dominants is that they have to ornament a note from the key already. And this one doesn't, even though you made it a hypothetical diminished chord there. So you can actually figure it out that it's not a secondary leading tone chord by that. But that's like a whole other level of thinking. Which is exactly how you, like the E diminished here. So Callie, if the E diminished was brought into this key, you might be tempted to think of it as a secondary leading tone chord because it's diminished. But it doesn't lead to F sharp, it leads to F, and F's not my key. So it's probably a bar 2. Okay? So the Beatles then are using this very colorful borrowed 4 on which word?
Nowhere.
Nowhere. It's a little bit of text painting, I think. It's trying to bring out the sadness of this person, this nowhere man. You follow? Now, when I was a kid, I liked this song, and some person who did not approve of rock and roll told me I should not be listening to this song because this song was full of unchristian hopelessness, which it is. It is. Of course, I had not studied philosophy. I didn't know that the song was about existential angst and nihilism and all these kind of things, right? But as a Christian, I look at it and I don't think I shouldn't listen to it. I think this gives me sympathy for people in the world whose lives have no meaning. This is expressing how people feel sometimes. They feel like there is nothing to life, that they are nowhere doing nothing. And if I want to be like Christ, I don't go, I shouldn't listen to this. I go, I should actually listen more so that I can have concern for these people, because I do have hope. That's kind of how I picture that process, that dialogue with a song that's written from a different worldview than I have. Okay, let's listen to this. Notice the chorus where it says "Nowhere man, nowhere man" starts on what Roman numeral? No. It's on a 3 chord. That's not a very strong progression, because that's not like, you know, if you think of the functional root movements by circle of fifths, that's pretty weak. But the Beatles do this a lot. They bring in songs for their color rather than for their strength. Same thing with the minor 4. Okay, we're going to listen to the first verse and chorus.
He's a real nowhere man, sitting in his nowhere land, making all his nowhere plans for nobody. Doesn't have a point of view, knows not where he's going to. Isn't he a bit like you and me? Nowhere man, please listen. You don't know what you're missing. Nowhere man, the world is at your command.
Okay. You know, the way musicians use these borrowed chords is in some ways like the way they use, similar to the way they use secondary dominants. You don't have to do it all the time. It's just one little chord here or one little chord there makes all the difference in the world, which is what happens in a Beatles song. Now I just handed out to you the first few measures that begin a really great piece by Johannes Brahms called the German Requiem. And the introduction is just for the orchestra. Now it has a huge choir and an organ and all that stuff too. But the introduction is just the orchestra. And you'll notice that we're in the key of F. Yes. And you'll notice that the entire example I gave you has an F at the bottom. What do we call this? Pedal point. Yes, you're doing great today. Pedal point. So that means that sometimes that F is in the chord, sometimes it's not in the chord, and when it's not in the chord, just ignore it because it's a pedal point. And also that means you don't have to worry about inversions, right? Because it's all being pedaled. No matter what's happening, there's an F at the bottom. So look at what happens in measure 2. In measure 2, we have an F, and we bring in an E flat, don't we? But I put up there that there's an implied A and C. Okay? So, by the way, this is not a borrowed chord. So I want you to figure out what is the Roman numeral here. Don't worry about inversions, just give me the Roman numeral. Count the F though. The F's part of it.
And we're in B flat? Or no?
We're in the key of F. We're in F. We're on measure 2. But we have an E flat.
It's not a secondary tone.
It's not a borrowed chord, I already said. Remember, everything is all about figuring out the quality of the chord. Figure out the quality of the chord. And if there's chromaticism, you have to account for it. Has anybody stacked it up into thirds, into a chord? What have you got, Lexi, for just name the chord?
Or F-A-C-E flat.
F-A-C-E flat. That's how it stacks up. Okay. Is it in our key? No. Why? Because it's an E flat. So it's got to be one of the chromatic categories. You've learned about 3 of them now. You've learned about secondary dominants, secondary leading tone chords, and